The gymnasium at Riverside Community Center looked like something out of a catalog. Streamers in green and gold ran the length of the ceiling. Round tables draped in white linen held centerpieces made from sunflowers and mason jars. A banner stretched across the far wall read, "Happy Retirement, Mr. Aldridge," in cheerful block letters, and below it, a long table of food that someone had clearly spent real money on. Roasted salmon, herb-crusted potatoes, a three-tiered cake with fondant maple leaves along the base. Everything was exactly right, except for the man sitting alone at the corner table, nearest the emergency exit, holding a paper cup of juice he hadn't touched, watching the room the way you watch a television channel you didn't choose. His name was Leonard Aldridge. He was 61 years old. He had taught grade 5 at Riverside Elementary for 32 years, and on the evening of his retirement party, a party organized by the school board, attended by colleagues, attended by the principal and vice principal, and several trustees he barely recognized, Leonard sat by himself and looked like a man who had wandered into the wrong building. Nobody had planned it that way. That was the strange part. Nobody had planned any of it. Across town, at a house on Braemar Court that needed its eaves cleaned and its front steps repainted, a man named Patrick Ossie was getting his daughter ready for a birthday party. Patrick was 43 years old. He was a high school science teacher. He coached junior boys volleyball on Tuesday afternoons and made a chicken stew that his daughter said was the best thing she had ever eaten, which he suspected was an exaggeration, but appreciated nonetheless. He had been raising Amara alone for 6 years, since her mother Joelle died of a brain aneurysm at 38 with no warning at all, no illness, no gradual decline. There one afternoon, gone the next morning, Amara had been 4 years old. She did not remember much about her mother now, which was its own quiet grief that Patrick carried without quite knowing where to put it. Amara was 10. She had her mother's laugh, and Patrick's stubbornness, and a collection of rocks she kept in a shoebox under her bed, organized by color. Tonight she was putting on her good sneakers and complaining that the laces were too tight. "They're fine," Patrick said. "They're not fine, they're cutting off my circulation." "You don't know what circulation means." "I do. It's blood flow. We learned it in health class." Patrick crouched down and retied the laces looser. Amara inspected his work, seemed satisfied, and said nothing further about it. The birthday party was for a classmate named Lily, or rather, for a classmate whose family had rented the community center on Greystone Road and invited 30 children and, apparently, the parents of those children. Patrick had read the invitation twice to make sure he understood. "Please stay for the reception. 8:30 p.m. He'd assumed it was a drop-off situation. He'd been wrong. He stood now, holding Amara's gift bag, a geology kit she'd picked out herself, because she thought Lily might like rocks, which Patrick had gently noted was a projection, and looked at the parking lot filling up with minivans and thought about going home. He did not go home, he went inside. The community center was loud and warm, and smelled like fruit punch. Children immediately fractured away from their parents, and ran toward a section of the gym, where someone had set up craft stations and a giant inflatable obstacle course. Amara looked up at Patrick with an expression that was asking for permission, without asking out loud. "Go," he said. She went. Patrick found himself standing at the edge of the adult section, a cluster of tables where parents he didn't know were already deep in conversations he had no entry point into. He recognized a few faces from school pickups. Nobody made eye contact. He picked up a plate, took some food he didn't particularly want, and scanned the room for somewhere to sit. That was when he saw the man at the corner table. Not the retirement party, was a different evening, a different story. This is the one where Patrick Ossie walked across a room and made a choice that cost him nothing. The corner table had one occupant. He was a man in his early 60s, wearing a neatly pressed gray blazer over a plaid shirt, sitting very still with a paper cup in his hand. He was watching the children at the craft stations with an expression Patrick recognized. Not sadness exactly, something quieter. The face of a person who has been forgotten without anyone meaning to forget them. Patrick had worn that face himself. At Joelle's funeral reception, when everyone wanted to talk to her parents, and her sisters and Patrick had stood by the kitchen doorway for 40 minutes, because he didn't know what to do with his hands, he recognized the geometry of it. The specific postures of someone who has become invisible in a room full of people. He walked over. "Mind if I sit here?" he asked. The man looked up. He seemed genuinely surprised, the way people do when they've stopped expecting anything to happen. "Please," he said, "go ahead." Patrick sat down, set his plate on the table and said, "I'm Patrick, I'm Amara's dad." The girl in the blue jacket. The man looked toward the craft tables, found Amara, who was already coating a piece of cardboard with glue and talking to her with great enthusiasm. "Leonard," the man said, I used to teach at Riverside, I'm a family friend. The Holloways invited me." He paused. I'm not sure they remembered they'd invited me, to be honest. Patrick laughed. It was a short, real laugh. "I'm not sure anyone here knows who I am either. I thought this was a drop-off." "So did I, and I drove 45 minutes. They ate in silence for a moment. Comfortable silence, which is different from awkward silence, in ways that are hard to explain but easy to feel. Leonard Aldridge had retired 3 weeks earlier. The party had happened 4 days ago, but the way he talked about it, quietly, almost to himself at first, made it clear the party was still happening somewhere in his chest. He hadn't planned to say any of this to a stranger, but Patrick had asked how he knew the Holloways, and Leonard had answered, and then Patrick had asked a follow-up question. A genuine one, not a polite one, and somehow the whole thing came out. 32 years. Grade 5, he had taught 3 of the Holloway children. He had taught their father, Martin Holloway, when Martin was 10 years old. Martin was the one who had tracked Leonard down, and insisted he come to his daughter Lily's birthday party, said it would mean a lot, said they'd be thrilled to have him. Martin Holloway had spent most of the evening talking to his brother-in-law near the food table. "Nobody did anything wrong," Leonard said carefully. He was the kind of man who was careful about things like fairness. "Martin was glad I came, he said hello, he introduced me to his wife. It's their daughter's party, they have a lot of people to see." "Sure," Patrick said, "I'm not complaining, I know you're not." Leonard turned the paper cup in his hands. "I just thought retirement would feel different." "That sounds foolish." "It doesn't. I thought there'd be more." He stopped. Started again. "I had a student once, Brendan. He was in my class in 2003, he came back to visit me when he was in university, and brought me a card. Just a card. It said something like, 'Your class was the year I start to like school.'" Leonard was quiet for a moment. "I still have it somewhere. I've moved twice since then and I still have it. I think about it sometimes, whether the work actually meant anything." Patrick looked at him. "You think one card from one student who drove to see you years later means it didn't?" Leonard smiled for the first time all evening. It changed his whole face. "You sound like my wife used to. Is she? 10 years ago? Cancer. I'm sorry, I have a daughter in Calgary, a son in Halifax. They call on Sundays." Leonard said it without self-pity, which somehow made it more affecting. "They're good kids. They just have their own lives." Across the gym, Amara had abandoned the craft station and was now at the obstacle course, waiting in line behind a boy who kept jumping the queue. Patrick watched her notice this, weigh her options, and then, apparently deciding the diplomatic route was more efficient, tap the boy on the shoulder and say something. The boy went back to his place in line. Amara did not appear smug about this, she just moved forward. Leonard had been watching too. "Yours?" he asked. "Yeah." "How old?" 10. "Good age," Leonard said. "They're still curious at 10, still think the world is figure-outable." He paused. "What does she like?" Patrick told him about the rocks, about the shoebox under the bed, about how Amara had once stopped in the middle of a walk to pick up what she called a really exceptional piece of quartz, and Patrick had pointed out it was probably just gravel, and she had said, with complete sincerity, "Not all gravel is created equal, Dad." Leonard laughed. "A full one this time. I had a student like that," he said. "Every year there was one, the one who couldn't walk past something interesting without stopping." "Were those your favorite ones?" Leonard thought about it. "No. My favorites were the ones who thought they were bad at everything, the ones who'd already decided." He looked at his cup. "Those were the ones where you could actually see it happen. When something clicked. When they realized that story they'd been telling themselves wasn't true." Patrick didn't say anything. He was thinking about something. "How many years did you say?" he asked. 32, and how many students is that, roughly?" Leonard calculated. "At 30 on average, it's 960 students. Give or take 1,000 people," Patrick said. "Who sat in your classroom at the age where the story gets set, where they decide if they're smart or not, if they're worth paying attention to. He let that sit, and you're wondering if it meant anything. Leonard was quiet for a long time. My daughter says something similar, he said finally. When I call her on Sundays and tell her I feel like I should have done more. What does she say? She says, "Dad, the fact that you're asking that is exactly why it mattered." He smiled, smaller this time, inward. I don't always believe her. She might be right. Amara materialized at Patrick's elbow approximately 40 minutes later, holding a small painted wooden car she had made at the craft station. She looked at Leonard with the frank, curious attention of a child who hasn't yet learned that staring is impolite. "Did you used to be a teacher?" she asked. Leonard looked at Patrick, who shrugged. "I did," Leonard said. "Grade 5, for a long time." Amara considered this. "My dad's a teacher, I know, he told me, he teaches high school. Grade 11 chemistry, nobody likes chemistry." "Amara," Patrick said. "It's what they say. I'm just reporting." Leonard pressed his lips together, suppressing something. Chemistry is hard to love until it suddenly makes sense. Then it's one of the most astonishing things there is. Amara looked at him more carefully, as if recalibrating. "What part?" "That everything you can see and touch and smell is built out of the same small number of things, arranged differently." He leaned slightly forward. "You like rocks," your father said. "How does he know that?" "He told me." "What's your favorite?" Without hesitation, labradorite. "Because it looks boring, and then you turn it, and it goes blue and green, and it's completely different." Leonard pointed at her. "That's chemistry. That's light interfering with the structure of the mineral. You already love chemistry. You just don't know it's called that." Amara stared at him for a full 3 seconds. Then she sat down in the chair beside him and said, "Okay, tell me more." Patrick watched his daughter pull her painted wooden car onto the table and lean forward, elbows on linen, ready to hear about feldspars and refraction from a retired grade 5 teacher at a birthday party neither of them had particularly wanted to attend. He didn't say anything. He ate a piece of roasted salmon. Some moments you just let happen. When the party wound down and parents started collecting children, and the gym began its slow return to an ordinary room, Leonard shook Patrick's hand by the door. "I'm glad Martin Holloway forgot he invited me," Leonard said. Patrick laughed. "So am I. Your daughter is remarkable. She's exhausting. The same thing at that age." They exchanged numbers in the parking lot because Amara demanded it. She had more questions about minerals and she had written 3 of them down on a napkin which she presented to Leonard with some gravity. He folded it and put it in his blazer pocket, and said he would think on them, and report back. He did. He emailed Patrick 3 days later with a 4-paragraph answer, links to 2 YouTube videos, and a note at the bottom that said, "I haven't written something that long since I stopped marking student work. Thank you for that." Patrick didn't think of himself as someone who had done anything particularly significant that evening. He had sat down, he had asked questions, he had listened. These are small things. They are, when you add them up, most of what we can actually offer each other. But 6 months later, when Leonard came to Amara's school science fair, not as a guest, but because Patrick had quietly mentioned it, and Leonard had quietly shown up, and Amara's project on mineral refraction, placed second in her division, and she ran across the gymnasium to find them both, and waved her ribbon in the air, like it weighed nothing. And everything once, Patrick thought, about the corner table. The paper cup. The man sitting by the emergency exit in a pressed blazer, waiting to feel like his life had meant something. He thought about how Leonard had walked into a school gymnasium that evening and said to Amara, unprompted, "Second place here means you understood it well enough to explain it. That's the whole point." And Amara had looked at him with the exact expression Patrick remembered from her at 4 years old, watching a caterpillar cross the driveway, open, unguarded, completely present. The work had meant something. The Brendan from 2003 with his card was not an anomaly. He was one of nearly 1,000, and that number didn't even count the daughters of strangers met at birthday parties in community centers. In cities teachers retire in alone. Leonard still calls his daughter in Calgary on Sundays. His son in Halifax. But now there's a third call, shorter, usually while he's walking, to a 10-year-old girl who updates him on the shoebox under her bed, and has started, on her own, keeping a field journal about local rocks, and who ends every conversation the same way, with the same question, Did you find anything interesting this week? He always has. That's the part that surprised him most. You spend 32 years teaching children that the world is worth paying close attention to. And then, one of them grows up and has a daughter who already knows it, and she sits down next to you at a table where you'd started to disappear. And asks you a question you weren't expecting. And just like that, you remember what attention feels like when it comes back to you. There is nothing complicated about what Patrick Ossie did that evening at the Greystone Road Community Center. He saw a man sitting alone, and he sat down. He asked a question and he meant it. That's all. There was no grand gesture, no public declaration, no moment that looked heroic from the outside. It was the kind of thing that happens without fanfare, and gets forgotten by the people who witness it. But Leonard Aldridge does not forget it. And Amara, who is 12 now, and still has the napkin with her 3 questions photocopied and taped to the inside of her field journal, does not forget it either. Ask yourself this: how many times have you walked past the corner table? How many times has someone sat there, holding something they didn't drink, waiting for the evening to end, and you thought, someone will sit with them, and kept moving? It costs nothing. That's the strange part. The things that stay with people longest are almost always the ones that cost the person who gave them almost nothing at all.